Good morning. We're learning as a Chutzpah for Shleima Filan Chai Basarach on Yud Beis Amud Aleph.
One more person
And right, and Shira Bas Shalams. So we saw in the Mishnah the machlekes between Ben Beseira and Rabbi Yeshua about someone who does a Pesach Shaloi Lishma on the morning of the 14th. That Rabbi Yeshua says if you do it a Pesach Shaloi Lishmai on the morning of the 14th, it's kosher because we treat it as if Yeshua says we treat it as if it's the 13th. It's not Erev Pesach. And Ben Beseir said no, it's possible because we treat it as if it was in the afternoon. The first pshat was that Ben Beseir holds that the whole day is considered the time of the Pesach. Then we saw Rabbi Yechon said no, only the afternoon is the time of the Karban Pesach. But Lagabe the din of Lishmai, since you can do it later on in the day, we already treat it as if it's the Zmanoi that it should become possible when you have a Machshava Shalai Lishmai of the Pesach on the morning of the 14th. So we said then you have a problem that the it's Nidcha, that the Pesach is going to be Nidcha, because in the morning you're not able to bring it either Lishmai, because it's not yet the time, and Shalai Lishmai will passel it, so it's a time when it can't be brought at all. So it should be nidcha, it should be pushed away permanently, and if you can't bring the Pesach afterwards. So Rabbi Avo said that we're talking about where he bring it. It's talking about you have to set aside your Karban Pesach on the afternoon of the 14th. Which everyone was very bothered by because they know you're supposed to tie your sheep to your bedpost on the 10th or in the beginning of the month. So, good. So now. So, Amalei Rav Zera, so we're up to 6 lines, 7 lines in the bottom. Amalei Rav Zera Levavo, Leimikasav Rabbi Yechon and Bali Chaim Nitchen. So, for the fact that you're basically agreeing with the whole premise. You're saying that the Karban Pesach would be pushed away, would be Nidcha on the morning of the 14th if you were to set it, if you were to be mafresh to the Karban Pesach, because at that point it can't be brought out Lishma, Shalai Lishma. So you agree that the Karban Pesach would be pushed away, even though it hadn't yet been slaughtered. And this is as we're going to see, there's a lot of disagreements or potential disagreements about how this rule of Dichay works. And one of the disagreements are, one mandama says, no, Dichay only applies to a carbon that has already been geschachten. We say it like the classic example is by the two Seirim of Yom Kippur, that one goes Lashem and one goes Lazazel. So we say if one was shechted Lashem, and then the one Lazazel escapes, something happens, so it can't get thrown off, and they go as a pair. So we say since that one that was shechted is no longer capable of being part of the pair, it's dacha, and you have to bring a whole new pair. So that's an example where the animal was already shechted. That's where you have dichay. But maybe you don't say it by a live animal. Live animal is still a basic thing. It's not yet, there's no possibility of dichay in it. So, but you see from the fact that from Rabbi Yochanan is saying this din, and he's not concerned that he's worried about Baalei Chayim. So you see, from the fact that you, Rabbi Avo, have to answer that he doesn't have to know, and you hold that Rabbi Yochanan holds Baalei Chayim, even a Baal Chayim could have the din of Dichay. Even the live animal that you set aside can become Dachay on the morning of the 14th. Amalein, he said, yes, that's true. Dam Rabbi Yochanan. I'll show you where Rabbi Yochanan says, Behema shel shnei shutfin. A behemoth that belongs to two partners. Hikdish chatzia v'chadzav alaka chatzia. And one of the owners was makdish his half, which is not going to be very effective because he wasn't able to be makdish the whole thing. But then he went and he bought the other half from his partner, Begdisha, and he wants to now he's being makdish the second half. Kedusha ve'ena kreva. So now he owns the whole thing. He was makdish it, so it's no longer his. But ena kreva can't be brought as a carbon. It's not capable of being brought as a carbon because at the time that he originally was makdish it wasn't all his. So he was makdish it couldn't be brought as a carbon because he doesn't have the ability to be makdish with someone else's animal. And so this is a raya that with fact we're saying Einekre, but it's because it's Dachi, because at the time that he was Makdash, it couldn't be brought. And now, even though now he owns the whole thing and he's trying to be Makdash the whole thing, it's already Dachi from before. Secondly, Va'isa Tmura, Utmurasa Ki Yitzaba. Now that he owns the whole thing, he has the ability to make it into Tmura, but the Tmura is also going to have the same thing. It can't be brought as a carbon. It's going to be Kaddish Ve'ena Kreb. So Shmami not flas. We see from this din that we just brought of Rabbi Yechon, we see three things. First of all, we see the thing that we brought it for. Shmami Balachayim Nidchin. You see that even though the animal was alive, he was just makdish it. He didn't shecht it, but it's still nidcha. It has a din of dicha. Ushmami no dicha meikara have dicha. Another issue that is argued about legabe dicha is dicha only when it's near nidcha. Do you only have dicha when the animal was at one point able to be brought, and then later it was pushed away, it was dacha, it became incapable of being brought. But over here, it wasn't when he first was makdash, he only owned half. So from the beginning, from the time he got it, it was incapable of being brought. So you see that the din of dicha applies even when there was no time at which it was capable of being a kosher carbon. So you see that dicha can even happen at the beginning without a nirav nidcha. Second thing, and the third thing is shmamina yesh dicha v'dam. You also see that one might say that the whole din of dicha only happens when the animal has become kaddish kedushas haguf, when the animal is ready to be brought as a carbon. For example, like we said, the Sar el Hashem that you already shechted for Hashem, it's certainly kedushas dam. It's an animal that's being brought as a carbon. But over here, I'm sorry, it's certainly kedushas haguf. The animal itself is kaddish. But over here, it's when he is makdish, his half of his shutvis in an animal, all he can do is be makdish it that it could be sold. He doesn't have shlita, he doesn't have authority over the whole thing to make it kaddish that it could go on the mizbech. But even so, we say, since it was, for a time, he was makdish it, and it wasn't capable of being brought, that pushes it off, that it's not going to be able to be brought at any later time. It's going to have a din dicha. Excuse me. 10 seconds, and we'll go turn on the air conditioner. Need some fresh air. The Rav learns in the shul. Right, to do everything in the shul. So should we move into the shul? Yeah, I think we've got. I think it's more comfortable there. Yeah, the second meeting actually here starts here, and then after we finish, they move there. After stickers, they move there. So they have two there. Yeah. They don't have the bima set up here. I guess they come by the time of by the time they get to the secretary, they move. For shakas, they go there. But slichas, they start. Second just do the slichas. They just okay. Amarul Amar Rabbi Yochanan. I have further questions about this concept of dicha. Again, this concept of dicha is that when something has become disqualified to be brought as a carbon, it's a permanent disqualification. Even when the reason for the disqualification goes away, we say there's a permanent dicha. Doicha, something is pushed away, gets pushed away. Amrul, Amr Rabbi Yochanan, Achal chaylev, someone ate chaylev, which causes him to be mechuyev chatas, the hefresh carbon, and he separated the carbon chatas, v'hemir, dos, and then he became a mummer. And we've seen before the Torah, we learned out a drasha that a carbon chatas is not brought by a mummer. A mummer is puzzled. He's not allowed he's not entitled to get a kapara. Carbon chatas is not available to someone who's a mummer. So his carbon chatas now became pushed away. It's unable to be brought. B'chazer, then he was chayzer b'tshuva. B'chazer boy, hayol v'nidcha yidcha. Since while he was a mummer, he couldn't bring the carbon chatas, The carbon chatas is gone forever. It's dachi.
Well, I mean, like he converted, so to
No,
speak.
no, mummer is not mummer. I don't know what he did. Conversion is we don't care about when someone
Right.
says they converted. He says he's not Shema mitzvahs. He's Chal Shabbos b'Hesia. He just doesn't. He's not following the rules. So such a person does not bring a carbon chatas. We don't
That
accept
defines mumma. Anybody who kind of officially states that
I'm
he's
sure
out.
that. I can't say that I know exactly what the rules are. I think like the Rambam, I think there's long Rambams and Rishonim exactly define what a mummer is. But essentially, it's someone who, to some extent, throws off the yoke of Torah mitzvahs. I don't know, how is it only so? I think if someone's l'tei oven, we had this in the back in Avodah Zarah. We had this discussion about what's a mummer. If it's l'tei oven, he's maybe not a mummer. Even if he does if he does a l'tei oven, maybe it's not a mummer. I don't know exactly. So such a person can't bring a carbon chatas. So his carbon chatas was ruined. Even when he does tshuva, he has to now bring a new carbon chatas. Someone who was over an avera that's mechuyev v'chatas, and he separated his carbon, but then he became a shaita. A shaita also cannot bring a carbon. Like Rashi said in Shtata, nidcha debin and das mesachtas erim perka'im mishkal yalai. That you need das in order to be able to bring a carbon. So his carbon was dachi v'chazav and ishtafa, and then he got his senses back. He returned to sense. Again, since it was set aside, it's permanently set aside. Utsrichi, we need both of them. If we just say the case of someone became a mum mishum dehu dachi nafshe biyadayim. Over there, he, it's his decision. No one told him to become a mummer. So he decided to do it. So that's why it's dachi. Idchi. But by the case of someone who became a shaita, which happened on its own, kiyashan dami, maybe that's like someone who fell asleep. Someone who falls asleep clearly is not going to say, since he doesn't have das while he's sleeping, he can't bring the carbon while he's asleep. But we don't say that it becomes dachi because that's it's something that happens and it's going to go away. And if we just said the case of someone who became a shaita, he doesn't have the ability to become a non-shaita. That's up to the Rebbeinu Shalom. The person has bechira that he could decide to become bichayzer b'tshuva. So maybe it's a less permanent type of dichoy. Right? He has the option to at any time get rid of that dichoy. So maybe that's not a permanent dichoy and doesn't ruin it permanently. That's why we need both of these examples. Someone ate chaylev, a hifrish carbon, and he separated his carbon chatas. And after, and it's going back to our hayriest days, and Bezdin made a hayra that chaylev is mutter. So now it gets into the whole that you have a hayru. You do something with hayra Bezdin, you bring a parallel davashal tzibur, you don't bring a carbon chatas. So now his carbon chatas is not going to be brought. And then Bezdin was chayzon it. Mao, what's it in? Now the way I understand it, I've seen it described in other ways, but the way I understand it is the reason why it's dachi. It's not because of the din that Bezdin made a hayra and then was chayzer, because he did it before they made their hayra, the way this case is described. But you can't bring a carbon for something that's not an isser. Right? If you go to the Beis Hamikdash, say, I'm bringing a chatas because I ate chaylev. They'll tell you, right now, you can't bring this chatas because they said that it's not a isser. What you did wasn't wrong. You can't bring, it's not a lav. You can't bring a chatas on it. So mi havi dichoy or loy havi dichoy? Is that considered a dichoy or not? Amle usaba ki pasar Rabbi Yochanan b'dichoy meha pasach. He said this is a classic case of dichoy, and this is exactly what he would give as the first example of a dichoy. My time. Why is this such a strong case of dichoy? Hasam gaver ichi karbon layitchi. In the first cases that we talked about, of where he became a shaita, or he became a mummer, the person can't bring the carbon, but the carbon itself is a valid carbon. He just there's something stopping him from bringing it. Hacha carbon nami itri. Over here, no one can bring a carbon chatas for eating chelav. The carbon itself is unbringable because it's not for an avera. We said in the Mishnah that Ben Azai added on, in addition to the way he stated it was that the din of the first part of the Mishnah, that karbanis Zevachim that were bought shalei l'shma are kosher v'le'olol b'alam shem chay. But he said that applies to Zevachim hanechalim, things that are eaten. And we said that that's coming to exclude Oila. He puts Oila in the same category as Chatas and Pesach, that they're going to be puzzled altogether. And he said, as I said, shivim zokin, from 72 zokin. It's like, what does he say zokin, Lashon Yachid? Should say skenim. So he said the kula b'chadash they were all very unified. He said they absolutely agreed with me. And as we're going to see in the Gemara, like he really gave a lot of credence to what they said, because it came from them. He said the Gemara is going to conclude, according to one shita, that it was like a Messiah that he had from these 72 skenim, that they all said that they all passed him like this, and therefore he doesn't even have it's a Messiah that a halacha, like as a halacha l'maishim b'sinai, and it doesn't have to do, he doesn't have any lima to tell him this thing, this thing.
This was a subheading or just Tom Skin?
I don't know. I don't think, I don't know if it was at the time of this. It would normally be 71. It wouldn't be 72. 70 skating, maybe plus him. I don't know where the 72 came from. The only difference in Ben Azai is that he adds Oila to Chatas and Pesach as things that are possible to Eloi Lishma. Amr Avuna, my time in the Ben Azai, what's the reason of Ben Azai? Oilahu Ishireach Nichayich Lashem. It says by Oilahu, says the Lashon, who? He Lishma Ksherish Eloi Lishma Psula. That it tells you that if you do it to Lishma, then it's kosher, but if you do it Shaloi Lishma, it's possible. He says the only thing he added on was Oila. He didn't say like Rabbi Eliezer said earlier in the Mishnah that he added on Asham together with Chatas and Pesach. So why doesn't he say by the Asham? If you're saying who tells you Oila, let's say Asham. Asham also who. So he says no, like we've mentioned before, when it says who by the Asham, it's referring to not during the Avodas Hadam, but when you bring the Emurim, which is a latter part of the Avodah, and it's not Ma'akev. If you don't do the Haktaras Emurim, he still gets a kapara. So therefore, since the who is referring to that, it can't be saying you don't do it with Lishma, it's going to be possible, because if you don't do it at all, it's going to be kosher. So but he says, so what about Bayayla? This who that Bayayla is also talking about at the end, right? What does the pasuk say? That's talking about what the emurim that you bring on the mizbeach. That's after the whole carbon, after the whole avodas adam. Then it says Oilahu reishireich nichayach Lashem. So by Oilah also, the who is referring to the part of Aktaras emurim. It's not talking about the actual avodas adam, which is, so it's not ma'akev. So l'chayr the who shouldn't tell you that it's l'shma, just like you're saying by Yashim. So Gemara, trehu ksivi. It says no. It says who twice. He brings on the side. It says the who that we just said it. And it says Viktartes kol ha'ayil hamizbecha Oilahu Lashem reich nichayach isha Lashemhu. So you have a second pasuk that says who. Rashi says, so he's making a main union, since it says twice who, even though they're both by Lachar Taras Emurim, but the extra one is coming to tell you Lishma, even on the way to Saddam. But it says two who's by Yashim also. Ela benazo, so we have to give up. Whatever you're going to say about Oila, you have the same kind of Bayashim, and Benazai never said Bayashim that Shalol Lishma is going to be possible. Ela benazai bekal v'chaymer ma'isila. He learns it from a kal v'chaymer. That's how he knows that an Oila Shalol Lishma is possible. Ma'achatas she'ein a kolel. If a chatas, which is not fully eaten, shachta Shalol Lishma psula. If you shechta Shalol Lishma, it's possible. What? I'm sorry, I meant kolel. It's interesting. It's fully burnt. When I say we're going to see Lagabi Pigel, it has to be consumed. It has to be nechal on the mizbeach. So that's why, like in my mind, I think of it as nechal. But you're right. It has to be fully burnt. Oila shu kol like kol shekain. An oila that is fully consumed on the mizbeach, certainly it should be shaloi l'shma possible. But you can't bring mechadas. Malchad shem Paris. A chatas is brought as a kapara for individual chait. An oila, even though it provides a kapara for oilas, for assays, but it's just a general. It's a more general type of kapara. It could be for all the assays that you do, but it's not brought. You don't have to bring an oila when there's not a specific chiyuv oila when someone's over in a mavatal an essay. So the Gemara Pesach chiyach, and some oilas are not brought at all for an essay. So the Gemara Pesach chiyach, I'll prove it from Pesach. Pesach is also pasul shaloi l'shma. Mal Pesach shchein zmane kavua. You can't bring from Pesach. Pesach is only brought one time in a year, so that's a chumrah of Pesach. That's why shaloi l'shma is pasul. So Gemara Chadas de chiyach. B'chazar adin lo roi zek roi zev lo roi zek roi zeh. You can learn it out from both Pesach and Chatas to tell you oila. Hatzara shabbos and shein kachim shachta shaloi l'shma pasul. Hapani yebi oila she kachim shachta shaloi l'shma psula. Let's learn out from Pesach and Chatas that oila is going to be pasul shaloi l'shma. So Gemara malat tzad hashavish men sheish men tzad karas. You can't compare them to an oila. An oila has nothing to do with the chiv karas, but a Pesach, if someone doesn't bring the carbon Pesach, he's chayiv chatas. And the chatas is brought for someone who is over on a lav that if he would have done it b'mezid, he's chayiv chatas. It's karas. So both of them have a relationship with karas. So l'chayra you have a tzad hashavish abahen. So how could you learn out from Pesach and Chatas to there's you can't say it's tzad hashava because there's a chumrah of Pesach and Chatas over Ayla. So Gemara ben Azai sad karas like parach. He's not maskim to this sad paras because, like we said, the two sad karas of Chatas and Pesach are different. The relationship to that they both have a relationship to karas, but it's not the same relationship. Pesach yichayev karas if you don't bring the carbon Pesach, and on a chatas you're bringing a chatas for having been over on something which you would have gotten karas. Person would have gotten karas if he was over at b'mezid. So it's not the same. You can't say the tzad hashava shabahan. That's they both have the same chumrah because it's two separate chumras.
Oil is good for, this is a second, the August is a second, of course, also. Whether that oil doesn't.
Yeah, I don't know.
Operate.
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if I don't know if the oil is mechaper for that. Could be the oil is only mechaper in SHA bakaras. Yeah. Correct Gemara. Asham Nami Laisi. If you're saying that the fact that the tzad karas is not a percha, why don't we had tried to make the same tzad hashava to learn out asham that it should be from Pesach and Chatas to tell you that asham should be pasul shaloi lishma, and which Ben Azai didn't say. So according to Ben Azai, from Karas, because he holds that he says no, you can't learn out Pesach and Chatas to Asham because they're a Pesach in a certain sense, since it's brought by everyone at the same time. It has certain aspects of a carbon sibur. To some extent, we treat it as a carbon sibur since everyone does it together. And Achatas, the Yom Kippur, we bring the Tumas Mikdash Ukdashav, the Kohen Gadol brings. So the Chatos that are brought as Kabbalah Sibur, but the Ashram is never brought as a carbon Sibur. By saying, but Tzad Karas Nami Parach. Could be he does hold of Tzad Karas. Ben Azai Gemara Gamela, so he doesn't learn it after the Kal V'chaimer, but this is just a whole different reason. He holds that Gemara Gamela. It was taught to him from his Rebbeim. Rashi says, Gemara Gamela me pi ayin beis kenim kedetnan. Like it says in the Mishnah, he heard it from the 72 skenim and he just accepted it. The whole Kal V'chaimer was only as a teaching methodology. He wanted to go through the whole Kal V'chaimer thing for the third time already. We've gone through this Kal V'chaimer and Tzad Shava. A number of times he wanted to do it just to remind them of the Kal V'chaimer. But Einach Hanami, we don't depend on the Kal V'chaimer. We learn it as a Gemara Gomer law. He learned it from his Rebbeim. Okay, we're going to stop over here.